Hey guys. Welcome to another edition of Vulnerability Matters. Yes, it is on a lovely Tuesday afternoon. The sun is shining bright up here in the Northeast, and we just going to talk about what my favorite topic is, right? Vulnerability. And I can't do this by myself because I got my lovely hostess with the mostest. She's out there in rainy California today. It's not sun shining out there. She told me it's raining. It's raining. So, well, it rained yesterday, and I think today it's a little more beautiful. But we're gonna bring her in. This is Kelley Tenney. What's up, Kelley? Welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm now recovered, and none of us have melted out here in Southern California with the rain. So I'm happy to be here with all of you today.
Yes, I'm excited about the conversation today, and I'm always excited about it. And we got to catch up. I know we're doing it quick today. And we want to give you guys an update too. We're going to hit you with this 30-minute show and going to give you some good tips and some things to move you forward. We're going to share some of the things that we're talking about, and Kelley is definitely going to tell you about the coursework and how to get that done. And we're going to follow it up with you guys to have some action steps and things to do, so you can take away from here some things that you may can take and implement right away in your place of work, or just with you. With you, it all starts with you. And I think a lot of times we don't think about making so much grand changes, and we just change how we do things. A lot of people will take notice to that, and you'll be surprised who's watching that, who's seeing that, and who's respecting the way that you're carrying things out. So it's very important, especially being in a leadership role, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
Kelley, how was your weekend? Touch on that. Touch on that. How was your weekend?
My weekend was fantastic, aside from the
Absolutely.
rain. Like I said, none of us know what to do around here when it rains. But I recently lost my grandfather. My grandfather passed on
Oh,
Thursday.
sorry to hear that. Sorry to
And
hear
so
that.
it's been, I was lucky enough to fly out to Arizona
Yeah. Okay.
um, just a week prior to that. And I said my goodbyes and we had
Okay.
our final conversation. So it's interesting that we're talking about vulnerability today because
Yeah.
I almost didn't share that with
Okay.
you, but that's just like exactly what we're talking about, right? There's so many
Right.
things that are important to share as experts and as leaders. And so it was an interesting weekend to have it's always interesting to lose someone that you're close to, but that all contributes to our vulnerability and what we learn from it and what we can share with others.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's important. And again, yeah, my condolences, you and the family.
Thank you.
It's a hard thing. And regardless of the circumstance or the situation, losing someone you love is hard. Whether it be friend, family, it's just a hard loss to take. Loved ones, especially in this time, and it seemed like there's been a lot of that over the past couple of
Yes.
years or so, especially with the
Yes.
pandemic coming in. A lot of the maybe surprising. Some may be okay. You thought it was their time, but you're still not ready.
Hmm.
It's so many different avenues in which that happens, but being vulnerable, it's a release, right? Because it gives you the opportunity for others to kind of get in the driver's seat with you and kind of shoulder
Hmm.
some of that. And I think we kind of miss those points, and we miss those opportunities because we have this sense of I got to be strong for, or I got to
Hmm.
hold up for, or I can't let them see me, break, and those kind of things. And I went through the same kind of thing when a couple of family members died for COVID, and I was like, I can't really go that way. I got to be this
Yeah.
strongness for the family, and I'm the mouthpiece, and those kind of things you take on. But it's a lot, and vulnerability really helps us to kind of deal with that. It puts us in a place where it's not an overload for us, and that's what we're talking about. We're talking about that vulnerability. It matters, and it
Hmm.
matters how you engage it. It matters how you release it, and it matters who in turn that you deal with. But we appreciate that, and we thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah.
And we gonna keep it rolling. Thank everybody that's
Yeah.
coming by. We appreciate you guys, Christine.
Oh, thank you,
Christine,
Christine. Yeah.
yes, yes. Christine saying that. Kathy, thank you for tuning in. It's so great to see you guys come here. We're talking about, and we can put our first thing out. We're talking about the benefits of vulnerable leadership. And when I
Mhm.
think about some of the benefits, of course, we all know we get caught up in, it's a weakness. It's a weakness. Kathy says, she's sorry to hear about your loss as well, Kelley.
Mhm.
It's the it's the weakness. It's a weakness. It's a weakness. This is what we constantly hear when we talk about
Mhm.
vulnerability and
Right.
and it being in that. But being a vulnerable leader absolutely gives us a power that is really not related to any other thing that we can bring to the table.
Mhm.
A lot of times, we as leaders, we have this notion of maybe we know it all, maybe we've been through some of the things, and we understand it because we've been in a training and we sat in classroom and we've been prepared and all of that. But the vulnerable piece of that gives the opportunity for others to connect with us. Even
Mhm.
in their leadership place, there may be others that are of leadership capacity. They just haven't been given that title, or
Mhm.
they're leading in the things that they're doing in their particular roles, and they're being examples. And I think the benefits of being a vulnerable or having a vulnerable leadership is one that you can come to. I think it creates that innovation, that creativity that workplaces need to thrive,
Mhm.
that growth where we can see others being lifted up, growing, given the opportunity to make mistakes and learn. Because it's so critical now that we put the onus on those who's making mistakes as a judgmental thing, but the mistakes that's being made is also a teaching thing for everyone involved. What you think about that on that vulnerable leadership?
I think it's true, and I think it goes further than even just the mistakes. When we talk about the benefits of vulnerability leadership, the first thing that comes to mind, and you mentioned this a few minutes ago, was about your ability to connect.
Yes.
And I think, I think traditionally what we see in leadership is that there's like a fence. Traditionally there's kind of like this fence between employees and the leaders, whether it's the managers or the people in the C-suite. And there's kind of been this separation. And when we talk about things like workplace wellness and workplace culture, I know as I know if I was an employee, I'm going to produce more and work harder and be more engaged if my leader is somebody I'm connected to. And, it's very similar to, and we've talked about this before, it's, something as simple as sharing my grandfather died. I think leaders or experts have been put in a position where vulnerability, like you said, is seen as a weakness. And we have to show up, we have to suck it up, we have to always be strong because we're the leader. But in reality, just sharing something simple opens the doors for that connection, opens the doors for how am I appearing, and how can people learn from me in terms of, I'm dealing with a loss, I've shown up for work, how am I still present? And that speaks way more volumes, I think, than withholding that kind of vulnerability, whether it's, as you mentioned, mentioning that I made a mistake, mentioning that I'm personally suffering a loss. Maybe it's mentioning the fact that I just don't feel well today, but on all different levels of that, I really think it helps break down those walls that we traditionally see between leaders and the rest of their team.
Yeah, it's something that, well, what you really had said, and really brings a magnitude of that. Because if we're really honest with ourselves, we really all have these moments of when we feel vulnerable, right? And it's not necessarily that it really changes the dynamic of what it is to a certain extent when you are a leader, but it's so much greater empowerment when you are a leader, because you have the ability to affect so many others that's under your leadership, right? You have an opportunity to, and I know that we may look at this as a difference, but you have an opportunity of molding, because that's what leaders do.
Mhm.
Leaders mold, and oftentimes we don't only think of that when it's in the aspect or the environment of schooling and learning. But your job is also those kind of settings, because
Yeah.
yes, you may have some kind of skill set that you were hired on, but for you to constantly or consistently be an asset, there has to be learning involved for
Mhm.
that company. And leaders have that onus, so to speak, to make sure that those resources are available for you to become the better.
Mhm.
And where we're not vulnerable enough to see that, or we're not self-aware to see that as leaders, we don't have the capacity to know when you're maybe failing back, when you're falling back. And we're so highlighted on bottom line and let's get this done.
Yes.
We miss the opportunity to actually grow the business.
Mhm.
We missed the opportunity to actually grow the personnel.
Mhm.
And we also missed the opportunity with that connection not being there. It replaces it with a void. So
Mhm.
now you have the animosity of us against them,
Mhm.
and no one's working together
Right.
because it's a movement of that. And I've seen that in so many other corporations and working in corporate for such a long time. They tend to take up that us against them mentality
Yeah.
with even doing work, with even attending events, with even giving their all. Like I'm just going to give them 75%. And it's
Mhm.
a funny thing I say that too, because I mentioned that it was a study that I read a couple of weeks ago. It says about 80% of the people in corporations are either disengaged or actively not being engaged. And I don't know how they came up with that, but I
Yeah.
was like, wow, 80%. So you mean to tell me there's
Yeah.
80% of people that's working in corporations that's not really engaged in what's going on?
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're just on automatic mode. They're, and this is, you said something about growth that I think is
Mhm.
so important when it comes to vulnerability. It's recognizing your own personal vulnerabilities and how you move through them that
Mhm.
allows you to personally grow. And I know that so many corporations put focus on professional development, personal growth, and things like that. Because we know, in the bottom line doesn't change if nothing changes, right?
That's
But
true.
I don't change unless I start to embrace and recognize my vulnerabilities and lead from them. Even something like losing a grandparent, whatever I'm learning in this process, I'm learning about myself. I'm learning about my strengths. Maybe I have a weakness that's uncovered that now I'm going to want to, work towards. But this is how we grow as humans. And when we try to stifle that vulnerability in the workplace, then your employees, your team, you're not growing, and which means nobody's changing, nobody's uncovering new strengths, nobody's discovering new connections, and so I think, I love what you said about the bottom line and growing, but I really don't think that you can grow without having space for vulnerability and being able to lead by example. I think that's the biggest thing. Vulnerability leadership, it's you have to lead by example. If you want your team members to raise their hand and maybe say like, "Hey, I've been a little unmotivated. I've been actively disengaged." Is that what you said they called it? Actively.
Yeah, actively disengaged, and I was like,
Yeah.
wow, that was a lot. That was to put that together was a lot.
But, I mean, I think it would require someone to be vulnerable to say,
Mhm.
"Hey, I'm gonna be honest, I've been actively disengaged and I really wanna be remotivated and find the passion in my work." Without vulnerability, those things like that will never happen, right? There is no room for growth without that kind of vulnerability. And it's all about leaders modeling by example. Leaders have to be both the one to say, "I've been there. Been burnt out in this company. And this is what I did to re-engage. And I would love to help you guys do the same," right? But you can't have any of that without showing your own vulnerability as a leader.
Yeah, it's so very true. And
Mhm.
in the essence of that, that kind of carries us to our next segue into that as far as some of the behaviors of vulnerability, because a lot of people not really sure. And I know in the essence of me speaking with a lot of, and I also don't know why. I guess now sometimes, like my dad used to tell me, problems come because you have solutions. So there's a continuation. I'm starting to talk to a lot of C-suite people in the essence of, I won't say behind the door, but I'll just say in the DM levels, they're
Mhm.
DMing me questions concerning things because, of course, there's this stigma upon them asking questions openly, like they should know. And my biggest thing that I've been getting away from that from is what is the actual behaviors of vulnerable leaders and how can we spot them, and
Mhm.
those are the ones that's engaged, and I use that so much as the foundation of, because when they're engaged with what's going on as a leader, vulnerability can be inspiring. It really
Yes.
can. It can
Mhm.
really foster an environment where people are really happy to be there. It really
Mhm.
can foster a culture where people can say, "Oh man, I love going to work there every day." And the opportunity is so many times missed because the leaders aren't just being vulnerable. Their behaviors are not that. They may feel that, but they don't want to present that as
Mhm.
who they are. They don't want to carry that as they concern or they see to be a burden of
Right.
what they have to put up with, or the disengagement from the employees. When I read that article, and it was in the New York Times that this article was, and I don't know if that was in the midst of also with this great resignation, there has to be, and I'm one that I look at things, if something is happening in such a great magnitude, there has to be something behind it.
Mhm.
So if I'm looking at all of these people that are all of a sudden, or so we think, because it's all happening at once, ready to leave these jobs, what's causing that?
Mhm.
And why is that happening? Now, do I have the solution totally as a basis of it? No, but I can incur with those that are leaving, with those that are getting ready to leave. What's making the changes behind that? So our behaviors as a vulnerable leader has to be of self-awareness,
Mhm.
looking out for those kind of things, engaging with your team, being personable and sharing personal is
Mhm.
not the same. Being
Yeah.
personable is just what it is. And yet, even what you sharing the story about your grandfather and him passing, we have to look at that. Now that puts me in a place of there's a connection.
Right.
There's a connection
Yeah.
there.
There's a connection, and I think in addition to that connection, there is a willingness
Mhm.
to teach through that and allow people to learn from it. And when I think about the great resignation, something that comes to mind within this conversation is I think the last couple of years have laid a foundation for people to really be alone with their vulnerabilities. I think when we went through this movement of being in a corporation, being in a workplace, to being isolated and having to work from home, I can speak from my own experience and even from my kids. There was a lot that bubbled up, I think, for a lot of people in terms of their vulnerabilities, things that maybe they shut down because you walk into your office building and you go into employee mode and you just disconnect from your personal life or whatever it is. But people have been in this space where I was teaching, I teach college out here in California as well. I was teaching in this office with my son in third grade on the other side of this wall, with my daughter, in fifth grade, two doors down. And there was a lot that popped up that I would say made me vulnerable that I didn't recognize when I was in a different environment. And I think with the great resignation is I think all of these vulnerabilities popped up. And when it comes time to going back to the old environment, I think the inability to be able to be vulnerable in those environments, I think turn people off. I think people maybe felt alive, or they learned more about themselves, or like we were talking about, maybe they grew in their own capacity as a person. And now the old workplace where vulnerability leadership is not taking place, maybe all of a sudden it felt too stifling. Maybe it felt like it was too confining because something awoke in them in terms of like, wow, I mean, think about how many people learned something about themselves
Wow.
through
Yeah.
the shift in a workplace environment that we had. And if you're not able to go back to a place of employment with leaders who demonstrate vulnerability, where you feel like you have this space to say like, hey, when I had to go back to campus, when my kids went back to school, I missed my kids.
Yeah.
I was like, I miss here. Strangely, don't tell them because we don't want them coming around too much. But like I went through a stage where I was like, my children are driving me crazy. I need my own space,
Hmm.
which many would not admit, I think. And then I went through this stage where I was like, I miss them. I miss hearing their little voices on the other side of the wall. I miss them peeking their head in saying they needed a snack because there's no more recess and I didn't pack their lunches anymore, right? But if I can't go back to work and have that space to be able to say, I feel like a loss now that I'm back here, or I'm struggling being back at work because I've been home for so long, then that's where people want to not go back. I think that's part of where the great resignation happens is all of a sudden people are like, I've been able to be a real vulnerable me. And I don't want to go back to that place where I couldn't, because now you can't you can't unlearn what you learn, right? So now there are these new people that have grown, and the old confinement of not being able to be vulnerable just seems too confining. So, I would love to hear your thoughts on character. You're the vulnerability expert, obviously, but like, what else can we see aside from leaders being willing to teach from their own mistakes and their own vulnerabilities? How can we really spot or these vulnerability leaders?
I think it starts with a lot of what you were sharing in in just in summary about the vulnerable leadership. It has to create this culture of
Mhm.
trust, and if we want them to truly embrace it, we have to embrace it. It goes down to the very minute level of where we try to place things so deep. Like my grandma used to tell me as a little one, she said, if you want to be deep, just do the right thing. She's like, it doesn't take this whole big like science thing to do stuff like we want to. And I don't know whether we pretend to or we think that makes us look better than, greater than, no more than, whatever those thens are. We
Mhm,
tend to
mhm,
place so much on simplicity of things that need to be done. I think our actions, if we would allow those to actually take place instead of our reactions or our verbalizing a lot of things, I think we will see a lot of things go forward. And us as leaders, we have to jump in there and say that and see
mhm,
that and act on that.
mhm.
Someone was talking to me earlier today, and I was talking to a potential client, and he was talking about we got to continue these talks at the table. And he was referencing that in everything that we were talking about. And after a few references, I said, well, let me ask you this. When are we going to start doing action from the talks that we've having at the table? And this is how we're going to have to do in leadership and being vulnerable. We
Mhm.
talk about these things. We know they create great culture. We know they build trust. We know they do connections. We know they bridge connections. We know they bridge gaps. They have us self-aware. There's so many benefits, yet we continue to just talk about those and not act on those.
Yeah.
We don't put those in place in a culture of where we spend a lot of time with a lot of people who are not necessarily our family members, where
Mhm.
we make a lot of decisions that are crucial to the well-being of a lot of people and their families in
Yes.
these areas.
Mhm.
Like, we're leaders in these areas. We are affecting thousands upon people, that not just the ones that come in and clock in, but you're affecting their families, their livelihoods, their
Mhm.
children, all of those kind of things. So when you put it in that realm, just the simplicity of actually having actions really is what's going to be beneficial. Take responsibility for the mistakes that's made. Ask for
Yeah.
help. Be transparent. Like, if you're starting to embrace those things and others think that it's okay to, those are some of the behaviors of a vulnerable leader
Mhm.
that will, oh man, we talking good stuff now. We're
Yeah.
going into the next part of that, which is lead us into this. How can we improve our
Yes.
team's performance? Some of those things that I'm just covering are really the basis for that. If we just be more self-aware of, more put yourself in the shoes of. And a lot of times we don't like to do this because it makes us uncomfortable. But think about the person that's actually carrying that burden.
Yeah. Yeah. And the word grace comes to mind. I use
Mm.
the word grace a lot with my college students. I always tell them at the beginning of the semester,
Mhm.
I'm going to ask for your grace because I'm a
Right.
mom. I'm a working mom. I have my own business. I'm also a teacher. I'm a wife, and I'm going to give you grace as well. So if you have kids, if you're just not feeling up to it, I ask for communication, but I ask for mutual grace. And I think that's kind of part of what you're touching upon. It's like,
Mhm.
allowing grace for yourself to make mistakes, to be able to say like, hey team, like I'm just not, I need some help today. And giving people the same kind of grace, being able to say
Mhm.
like, hey Carl, it looks like maybe maybe you've got your mind someplace else today, and
Mhm.
why don't you leave a couple hours early? Why don't if you want to come in 2 hours early on Monday, why don't you go ahead and make that up? It's that kind of vulnerability to be able to say like, I get it.
Mhm.
um and that I think really opens the door for that kind of team performance. I mean, I'm a loyal person. So I'm like, if I know you have my back, like I'm your ride or die. Like I have your back, right? And that's where I think what you're talking about with team performance, that is personal and in business. Like I will give 150% business wise to, or any team wise, if I know that my leaders would do the same, would give me the same grace that I asked for, would be able to say like, Kelley, your grandfather died. If you want to, go home early, it's no big deal, right? But that's where that performance comes in. It's not just, I think if you want people to do quality work for you, you have to give back, because like you said, we're knowing that people are only showing up actively disengaged. People are coming to work just going through the basic motions to earn a paycheck, to clock in and to clock out. That's not the kind of team that you want. But without vulnerability, I don't think that you can develop team members that really will give their heart and soul without being a vulnerable leader, without being a human and being willing to be vulnerable and connect on that kind of level.
Yeah, it's a connection beyond any connection, because it puts you in a place of humanity and not services. It puts you in
Yes.
a place of value and understanding versus what can you do for me.
Yes.
And when you change the dynamics of that perspective and people's feelings, things change for how they reciprocate toward you. If
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at you for more than a paycheck, then it's obvious to you I'm going to give you more than
Right.
what I desire. It's you can a lot of the um, what I can see a lot of times, even when you go to the supermarket, I thought about that, and I was trying to think of the occupation that they have, the cashier. I don't know why that left me, the cashier. And I often do this as sort of like a project for myself. I go to a line, and maybe I go to Walmart or I go in a grocery store or something of this nature, and I always spot lines. And I do this as kind of like attitude and kind of like because I love watching people in their inhabitants. And I see a cashier here that strokes the food across the counter nonchalantly.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and their attitude to me from what's seeing that now, I don't make any grand assumptions because it could be a whole lot behind that. But the attitude that I see that, I look at another register and I see someone feverishly swiping the items, bagging it for the customer, putting things together, sitting it over in their cart. So I'm looking at these two lines, and the first thing I'm saying, okay, well, which line am I getting in? And I make these kind of judgments based upon what I see. But I see a cashier with an attitude of like, I'm here 8 hours. Okay. You're going
Yeah.
to get it how I give it to you for 8 hours.
Yeah.
That's what they care about. I
Yeah.
see another cashier that I'm going to make the best opportunity I can while
Mm-hmm.
I'm working. I'm going to move this for the individuals that's coming in my line. I'm going to make this a great experience for them.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the two tails of employees. Now, how could that be adjusted? All you have to do is the self-awareness of a leadership.
Yes.
Looking at that, a vulnerable leader say, maybe you're not having it today. Why don't you not do cash register today? Why don't you see if you can do some stocking or help somebody in another area? Those are the
Yeah.
kind of things that we as leaders miss the mark on, because she's scheduled to do cashier, so we're going to keep her on there. Her attitude's horrible, but we're just going to keep her on there.
Yes.
There's no connection there that says that. And it's a movie that I'll say this and us closing. This half hour went great, right? I remember The Devil Wears Prada. I don't know if anybody saw that movie.
One of my favorite
I happened
movies.
to accidentally see it, right? I was just flipping the TV one Saturday, and it kind of like caught my eye, and then I just said, "Oh, this is pretty interesting. I'll watch it."
Yeah,
I can't tell you I would have went to the movie theater to see it. It just happened to catch me on a Saturday.
I did. I will say.
And, and it was just amazing how the lady, when the employees, when she came in and her demonstrative attitude, how they got the employees like kind of like cleared out the
Mhm.
hallways when she arrived at the place. They were so like terrified of like her demeanor and how she was. They didn't want to run into her unless it was like absolutely necessary. Like they just, it was hands down such a bad environment, such a stressful environment. And us being a vulnerable leader have our opportunity to improve our team's performance by creating that safe space in that environment where people say, yo, you know what, this is my place of employment and I love coming to work here. And it's up to us and where we can do that. We can do
Yeah.
that.
Well, and in that movie, because I know it so well and I've seen it
Yes.
100,000 times, she eventually shows her vulnerability
Yes.
to, um, I can't even think of her name, but to the girl that gets hired, right? And
Yes.
so, and the girl, and she begins to be willing to teach. Don't make this mistake. This is what I did wrong. Here's the advice that I'm going to give to you from my own, being vulnerable and sharing that with you. And she grooms basically this
Yeah.
cookie cutter of herself, but someone who has that humanistic side. She actually grooms herself and the pieces in her that potentially she's been holding back the whole time. And I think that's the piece. Um, I know you're creating some amazing courses on vulnerability
Yes.
and
Yes.
things like that, and having some tools out. And I think a big part of vulnerability, part of when I talk about helping others teach their brilliance, it's your vulnerability that actually gives you your brilliance. There's 100 people out there that can teach about being good leaders. But like Carl, for you, your willingness to be vulnerable and to teach others how to be vulnerable, that's your unique brilliance that you're going to bring to leadership. And none of us, we're all the same without recognizing our own vulnerabilities. That's what
Yeah.
makes us unique. That's what makes us different. That's what makes my ability to teach about creating courses or teaching life's lessons. It's my life's lessons that allow me to turn around and teach others. And that's the piece of that. I mean, that's the core of being a good leader. A good leader teaches employees on how to be successful, how to be productive, how to grow within a company. But they can't do that without being willing to teach from their vulnerability as well. And, I love that you've recognized that. And I know you're going to be doing a lot with teaching others how to be vulnerable
Yes.
leaders. And I hope you've trademarked that vulnerability leadership. You better go do it if you haven't.
Yes, I'm in the midst of that, and the vulnerability matters as well. So if you hear it, it's paperwork has already been started on that. So
Amazing.
don't get yourself in trouble, people out there.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's true. And I think that's where we come in when we
Yes.
talk about teaching others, our own expertise, we have to
Mhm.
be willing to be vulnerable to say, like, this is why what I'm teaching is going to be a little bit different than what you're going to hear someplace else.
Yeah, because it really is, and it's been, and you have been a big inspiration to that. It's going to be a big help to getting that across as well, because your expertise in diving right into that really makes it easy to just focus on your zone of genius, as so many people say. I never heard that term so many times before, before I got on this platform, but it's so true, and you operate into that because you have an understanding of knowing that, and you can only be vulnerable. Vulnerability is it's my growth. It's what it's
Mhm.
caused me to grow. It is what it's caused me to take what I needed out of situations. It has caused me to apply, to make applications, to be better at. And
Yeah.
these are the things that's really is going to enhance any environment, and the courses and the things that we're going to be showing you and teaching you are they're going to be second to none, because
Yeah.
a lot of people could talk about it, but the lived experience is a great teacher.
Mhm.
So we thank you guys so much.
Yeah.
Kelley, tell
Thank
them where they
you.
can reach you at. I put up your teacher brilliance. Well, tell them where else they can
Amazing.
reach you at.
Amazing. You
Yes,
guys
yes,
can always just find me on LinkedIn also.
yes, yes.
Always a good I mean, we were like, let's make this short and sweet, but now I'm like, are we sure? We have so much to talk about. So I can't wait to come back for our
Yes.
next live.
Yes, guys, we have this on the schedule. You guys, I'm all over the LinkedIn, right? I got shows all over. Me and Kelley,
Yeah.
we do this show every other Tuesday, so we definitely want you guys to come in and chime in on that. We got more things coming out. We're working on some things back in behind the scenes, and to make sure that I get Kelley the things that she needs so she can make it shine, because that's what
Yeah.
she does. She teaches your brilliance. I never heard anybody say that before I met Kelley, right? Because a lot of times people say, "I teach you this, I teach you that." I never heard anybody say they teach me my brilliance,
There you
right?
go.
It's something about that intrigued me, and it should intrigue you as well. Also, check me out. I got April coming in. I got another great month of the Vulnerability Transformation Program, the VTP. Go to the website, sign up, /crossrwatkins.com/VTP, so you can get registered for that. It is beginning on April 4th, which is next Monday. I begin every first Monday of the month with some new people. I got a couple people already signed up. It is a safe space, safe psychological space where we run through some exercises to a vulnerability assessment. And we try to work on some of those fears that you have of moving yourself forward through that, and being the leader or the individual that you want others to follow. That's really what it's based on. We're just encouraging leaders to go into themselves, be better for themselves and for those that they lead. So make sure that you check that out. We'll see you guys in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And remember, guys, vulnerability matters. So you guys have enjoy the rest of your week. And Kelley is going to get out there in California and soak up some of this sunshine.
We're ready. We've had
Right.
like 2 inches of rain. We're done for the year. We're good.
She's good. She's good. So you guys have a great one. See y'all guys next time.
Okay.